Hello and welcome everybody in this new episode of our podcast in which we talk to people all around the world who are concerned with building peace. And peace is something that we, as you all know, and look to the news every day, and we see the horrific images from both Ukraine and Gaza and Sudan and so many other places. Peace is something that we are all longing for, and therefore I'm very happy always to meet people who are experts in certain fields that can tell us more about war and peace, and who are also working to promote peace. And I'm very happy today that I can talk to Marina de Regt. Marina is an anthropologist and associate professor at the Vrije University, the Vrije Universiteit in Amsterdam. Welcome, Marina.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for joining our podcast. Marina, you have a lot of expertise as an anthropologist working in the Middle East and more specifically Yemen. Yemen has been qualified by many people as sort of the conflict there as a forgotten conflict. We all know somehow that something is happening, something terrible has been happening. We've seen some images, but it never got the attention that wars like Ukraine and Palestine are now getting. But suddenly this it seems to be changing because the Houthi actions in the Red Sea, and people are suddenly wondering who are those people in Yemen actually. Before we go in depth into Yemen, I would like to ask you, how come you have been how come you are interested in peace? What brought you on as an anthropologist? What made you interested in promoting peace?
Well, I should say that it's something that I was brought up with. My father was a pacifist socialist, so I have been brought up, as in a pacifist way, and that meant that we were always taught not that violence was not the way to solve problems, but that we had to solve problems by talking. Another thing that was part of my upbringing is that my father always took us to demonstrations against wars. I remember the first demonstration was against Franco in Spain. I think I was about 8 years old. But after that, my father was very active in the peace movement, in IKV, the interchurch, peace movement in the Netherlands, very active against nuclear weapons. So it's in that sense part of me. My two brothers also were refused to go into the army. My father also, obviously, and also his brother, and it's just part of the family, of the De Regt family. My mother's family is a bit different, but of course my mother was also, she was also a pacifist. So that is something that came by growing up, and I think even the fact that I chose anthropology as a studies is also inspired by my dad, who was very concerned with and engaged with, say, parts of the world that were far away, and that he thought we should pay attention to.
Yes. So you're talking about your brothers not joining the army. Actually, it's becoming more. How do you say it? It's again becoming a question. I think the 17-year-olds in the Netherlands have all received now letters that they again may be called up for a draft at some point.
Yeah.
So it's something that we hope would never return, but still,
exactly.
Yeah.
My dad passed away 4 years ago, but what he has been experiencing over the past decade, and I think I'm very happy he passed away and that he's not seeing what's happening at the moment, because things seem not to go into the right direction, but in some cases very much reversed, and very, very worrying.
So,
Yeah.
yeah. So of course we will talk about Yemen, but yeah, you are talking about the general situation in the world. How, if you look back to the past decades and what's developing now, some people say, yeah, there will always be war and there's nothing special about that, etc. But do you feel that the current wars going on in both Ukraine and Gaza and other places, is it different than before, or is it business as usual?
Oh, that's a difficult question. I think maybe in a long-term perspective, it's business as usual. But of course, we are living now and we are experiencing this now. We are of a certain, well, some of a certain generation that we hoped indeed that this would not happen again. So yeah, I'm worried, but on the other hand, I also, and that is something that I also, of course, got from my upbringing. I'm also a hopeful, and I still believe we can turn the tide, so to say.
That's good to hear.
But yeah, very much. But it's not easy, and
Mhm.
if you maybe have a larger, say, macro perspective geopolitically,
Mhm.
then things look very, very worrying. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So what brought you in the first place to go to Yemen?
Yeah, so that is also a good question. In fact, also the question of you, why as an anthropologist I'm concerned with peace. In fact, well, I answered that, but I always present myself as not somebody that is a scholar of conflict. You have also, of course, conflict
Yes.
studies. I'm not
Mhm.
a conflict studies person. I'm not even a peace studies person. I'm an anthropologist who's interested in North Africa and the Middle East, the Arab world, already from the moment. And before I started studying anthropology, I had a very strong interest in the Arab world, wanted to learn Arabic, wanted to travel to North Africa, which I did. But the conflict, I have to say, came to me because Yemen indeed became a war zone. And that, in fact, um, forced me to engage with questions about peace and conflict. But
As an
yeah,
as an anthropologist, what are your what before
yes,
the Pete question became important?
yeah,
What was your
exactly.
main focus?
Yeah, so that's how I came to Yemen. In fact, I wanted to work in North Africa more than the Middle East or the Arabian Peninsula. I did research for my master's, what was doctoral at that time, in Morocco on women and development, women and labor. I've always been interested in more developmental issues and not so much the more narrow cultural issues in the Middle East. And that's also kind of an engaged standpoint, because I think that anthropologists for a long time have, well, of course, with Orientalism, kind of romanticized or exoticized the Middle East and the North Africa as if there were not similar, say, developmental issues as anywhere else in the world. So I
Mhm.
did research in Morocco with carpet workers. And after I finished, I looked for jobs and I saw a job in a development project in Yemen.
Mm.
And I didn't know Yemen at all, but I thought that's also an Arab country. I speak Arabic now, not so well, but I did. Let's apply. And I got the job. And that is more than 30 years ago. So I went to the other side of, say, the Arab world from, well, Morocco and the
Yeah.
western, extreme west side to Yemen on the southwestern edge of the Arabian Peninsula. And I stayed 6 years in Yemen working in development projects with women. I worked for Dutch projects, and at a certain moment I said I want to go home and reflect on what I've been doing and write about the women that inspired me, because Yemeni women are, very strong and outspoken women, but as we all well know, the gender inequalities are tremendous in the country. And I wanted to write about the women I worked with in development projects. And so that's how I came to Yemen, and
mm,
it hasn't left me.
yeah. And
Yeah.
then the conflict broke out. Um,
The war, you can say.
the war,
Or
yes, sorry, yeah. It was a real war. Were you there at the moment? Which year are we talking about now?
yeah, so the war, it depends. Many Yemenis say the start of the war was September 2014, when
Hmm.
the Houthis occupied Sana'a and Hodeida, two main or big cities in North Yemen. I was supposed to go to Sana'a in September 2014. I
Hmm.
was in Ethiopia, but it was on the news. It wasn't possible. I couldn't go. And then about 6 months later, in March 2015, the
Hmm.
Saudi-led coalition, so a coalition of Arab states that decided to try to get the Houthis out of, well, out of Sana'a, but out of, yeah, the part of Yemen that they were controlling.
Hmm.
That is in many in many cases seen as the start of the real
Yeah,
war. So it is almost, yeah, we are, and the war is almost entering its ninth year.
yeah. Before I ask you more, like, can you say something about the makeup of the population? Who lives there? Who are the main groups that are part of Yemen, the Yemeni
Yeah.
society?
Yeah, Yemen is a very big country.
Mm,
People often think it's just a desert, but
mm,
if you, well, Google landscape Yemen or architecture, you see that the northern part of Yemen is very mountainous, while the southern part of Yemen is very, yeah, it's much more flat and it's much more desert-like. There are about 30 million people now. I think when I went to Yemen three decades ago, there was maybe 16. So there's a huge population increase,
mm,
very young population also. Um, North Yemen was divided in North and South Yemen until 1990. So South Yemen was a socialist state, and North Yemen was a more conservative and capitalist state that was oriented towards Western countries and also got a lot of development aid from Western countries, while South Yemen was a socialist state. But
mm,
so till the fall of the Berlin Wall, there was this, yeah, separation between the two countries. But then with the fall of the Eastern Bloc and the USSR, South Yemen also lost its income and its support, its financial and political support. So that was in fact the reason these two countries became one and united. But the population is, so also very diverse, but they consider themselves really Yemenis. There's a Yemeni identity, although now the current war leads to a lot of sectarianism and division. Um, North Yemen never colonized, people very friendly, mainly living in rural areas, a few big cities. Of course, also, yeah, being modernized a lot, especially after the oil boom in Saudi Arabia and the Gulf states. A lot of Yemenis migrated also to those states and returned. It's a very diverse country.
mm,
Landscape, beautiful architecture, beautiful people, very hospitable and warm. And I always want to stress that when I speak about. I mean, yeah, it's, as you say, not known very much in the Western media. So I think it's so important also to mention how many people live there
mm.
and yeah, what a special people it is.
Yeah, yeah. Great. Thank you. So you were mentioning about that many Yemenis take the 2014 attack by the Houthis on Sana'a and Hodeidah as a starting point. But I can imagine that this didn't also happen out of the blue. Um, what was playing on what was playing in the background of these attacks, and why did it become why did they attack? At what was at play at
Yeah,
the moment?
this is a very good question because indeed there's a long history and it is probably too difficult or we don't have time to explain really the length of the history. But one thing is important is that in North Yemen used to be an imamate and it was ruled by an imam who was both political and religious leader. Uh, this imam and this imamate ruled Yemen for centuries. The families of the imam were Zaydis. That means that they were from a particular, say, segment of part of Islam, which is Shia, and they were the minority in Yemen, but they ruled the country. In 1960, between 1960 and 1970, there was a civil war in which Republican forces tried to establish, overthrow the imamate, and they succeeded. In 1970, the Yemen Arab Republic was established in the north. This meant that the Zaydi population lost its power to some extent. The current group that we call Houthis, and they call themselves Ansar Allah, they are in fact descendants of these Zaydis. The Republic of Yemen, over the past 5 decades, since 1970, was ruled by, say, presidents, and especially the last president, Ali Abdullah Saleh, who were to some extent pretending they were leading a democratic country. But some parts of society, got more attention than others. The Arab Spring, I make a big jump. The Arab Spring in 2011 was, of course, also for Yemen very important. So Yemenis went to the street and started to protest against the already 30-year-old regime of Ali Abdullah Saleh. The Houthis were part of that Arab Spring, although they were, in a way, making use of the opportunity to overthrow the existing regime. The Houthis had already, for I think more than 10 years and longer, 20 maybe, been resisting the regime of Ali Abdullah Saleh. And they were also very much against Ali Abdullah Saleh's involvement in the war on terror and in its being an ally of the United States. But in addition, they were also very much against the influence of Saudi Arabia in Yemen. And Saudi Arabia saw Yemen a bit as its backyard. And it was also increasingly influencing, say, Islam, Orthodox Islam, Wahhabi Islam. And as you can imagine, the Houthis as Zaydis and a Shia minority saw that as a threat. This is a simplification, but this is some kind of, an explanation how in Yemen, the Arab Spring movement, in a way was an extremely kind of positive movement in which women and young people and activists hoped to bring a change about, but political parties and the Houthis, in fact, hijacked the Arab Spring. And what happened after Ali Abdullah Saleh stepped down, that was in November 2011, he refused to leave. But at a certain moment, he was forced to sign an agreement, but he was allowed, it was a kind of an agreement, say brokered or made with the help of the Gulf countries who were intermediates in the conflict. Ali Abdullah Saleh got immunity and he could stay in Yemen. And his, say, right hand, Abdul Mansur Hadi, became the interim president. And what you see from that moment on in 2012 is that Ali Abdullah Saleh started to kind of call on his constituency and people that were supporting him to work against the new interim president. And at a certain moment, he even started to support the Houthis in their government and in their military actions too, because the Houthis have been militarizing for years. I forgot to say one thing. Ali Abdullah Saleh fought about exactly six short wars against the Houthis in the, say, upper north of Yemen, because the Houthis were already a threatening, say, a movement that asked more and more and, not attention, but also claimed much more power. This is a long answer, but maybe it gives some idea.
Absolutely. It's very clear. And about Ali Abdullah Saleh, because about the Houthis is clear. That's the Shiite group within who used to be the ruling elite of Yemen, who lost their power during
in fact,
the 60s.
In that time they were not called Houthi. They were called Zaydis, and Zaydi is Zaydis are, in fact, is a more umbrella term for this group. While Houthi comes from it's a family name, from a village also called Houth. But now we use it as a kind of the name for this
and
whole.
They themselves use Ansar Allah. What does that mean?
The servants of God.
Yeah, so that's more like an honorary name that they.
Yes.
Yeah. So, but Salah himself, what group did he represent? A certain group himself, like a family or a tribe or a religion?
It's a very good question. In fact, he was of tribal descent. Yemen is a very it's a very tribal country, but also a country that is has very strict social stratification. So some people claim, and that is also the Zaydis claim, that they are descendants of Prophet Muhammad. You have also a group of families that are really very dominant in the judiciary. What do you call them in English? Not the lawyers, the judges, the families of judges. And you have a lot of tribal people of tribal background. That is not an ethnicity. It's really a layer of society that.
I was wondering, like how like also let's keep calling them Houthis because that's what people know now. Should we see them as a more of a religious group or more of an tribal entity or more of a what kind? How do?
So they are not tribal. So they are in fact claiming they are descendants of Prophet Muhammad's families. So they are what is in Yemen called Saada, and that is the upper layer of the Yemeni say social system. They are elite families, and they that's also why they say we are the righteous rulers of Yemen. And they do not believe in democracy or democratic selection of the ruler, because they believe that, like in many Shia movements, the power or the ruler of a country or of a party or of a movement is hereditary. It's based on family background.
Yeah.
So you're the chosen ones. And of course, there are also people that are now part of the Houthi movement and that fight for the Houthi movement that are not at all like Zaidi or not at all of that family background, because that's a or relatively small group. I think about 50,000 people, but their support is larger. But what I believe is also that they very much buy support, and
Mhm.
for example, people join their forces because they want to make a living and have a salary.
Mm.
So yeah, who are the real Houthis is
Yeah.
yeah is a question, but
Yeah.
in yeah
But as I understand you well, it's more of a sort of stratum of society rather than a tribal or language
yeah
of religious. Like,
yeah.
are there, because does religion play a role in the conflict, or is it mainly having to do with the division elite versus people?
Yes, so a religion is playing more and more a role. I wouldn't say it's a religious war. In when I lived in Yemen, and what I also hear from many Yemenis that I know is that before, say, 2 decades ago, 3 decades ago, before, people went to the same mosque. People may have prayed in a different way, the Sunnis and Shiites, but nowadays they do not do that anymore. Nowadays there's really, say, religious sectarianism. People know, yeah, who is Sunni and who is Shia.
Mhm.
The last time I was in Yemen was in 2013, so it's more than 10 years ago. And
Mhm.
then I also observed that families started to, like elite families, started to celebrate Shia rituals or holidays, Ashura, and I'd never heard of that. I was like, wow. So that identity, the religious identity, has increasingly become stronger and stronger among those families. While it, you can ask, I mean, I ask myself too, like maybe it was wrapped on what is it under the carpet. It was not
Mhm.
talked about, but there were differences, but they were suppressed
Mhm.
because the previous regime and say the constitution of Yemen was equality of all citizens and no more family background that
Mhm.
but of course these differences are not so easy
Yeah.
to get rid
So
of.
it's because if we hear in the media talking about the Houthis, then it's always the Iranian-backed Houthis, no?
Yeah.
It's in order to blame Iran for a lot of things, but how close is that connection in reality?
Yeah, there's for a long time people have been saying there's no evidence, but I think that is not a position we can take anymore. I think
Hmm.
for Iran, the Houthis were in the beginning not that important. I think the Houthis is that what's going on in Yemen is very much an internal problem, an issue. Uh, but it has definitely, Iran has seen it as an opportunity to strengthen its position on the Arabian Peninsula, and it's very very clear that they have been supporting the Houthis. But it's
Yeah.
not that the Houthis cannot do without Iran; they
Yeah.
can.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, clear. So they're also very much an independent force. Just one more question about the internal situation before I'd like to talk more about the international players here in Yemen. Um, so the non-Houthis, let's say, how do they identify and what are they fighting for, and what problems do they have with these this group trying to rule?
Yeah, it depends, of course, about
Yeah.
which part of the country we're talking. It's a
Hmm.
huge country. As I said, the south of Yemen is very different and was a socialist country. And then it became part of, the unified Yemen. In South Yemen, there's a very strong independence movement since the beginning of the war. South Yemenis are also not tribal and not so. There's the social stratification is less strong, and there is a well the Southern Transition Council, called the STC, is in fact the ruling, say, party in South Yemen, especially in Aden, which was the capital of South Yemen. So that is one group in the south that is totally against the Houthis, and they don't want to have any. They also say, North Yemenis, just sort out your problems. We want to have independence.
But to talk about north and south, if I look to a map, then you see the Houthis are also very much in the southern south western corner. No,
They the in fact
I mean
the
the Bab el, what is it? The
Bab
thing that,
Mandab.
yeah, the
Yeah.
thing that they close, that's very much to the
Yes, exactly,
southeast. No,
exactly. That's
that's
very close. True, true.
yeah, yeah,
So we could say the border is going very close to Thais,
yeah.
and that is a very big city in, say, central Yemen,
Hmm.
and close to South Yemen,
Hmm.
and that city has been under siege by the Houthis for years. And that city, a beautiful city, but you can almost compare it to Aleppo. It's really, really being a war zone. And so I would say that that's a bit like the dividing line between where the
Hmm.
Houthis, the Houthis occupation of Yemen
Hmm.
ends. They were trying to get to Aden, but that has failed, and they withdrew. But Thais is still the city they're fighting for.
So the people at Aden, they are they more influenced than by the socialist
Yes,
history?
much
Yeah,
more, much
yeah.
more,
So
much
they're
more.
also maybe less religious in a way, or less.
Yes,
Yeah,
yes,
yeah.
yes, yes. And
And
there, of course, no Zaydis in, or although I have to say that after unification, many people from the north went south, bought land, bought houses, established companies, and a lot of southern people felt that their independence or their own identity was totally being threatened by Northerners.
mm,
And I've seen that also myself because I traveled a lot there in the 90s. And that is also the reason they really, so yeah, I don't know how the, social landscape in South Yemen is now, but I can imagine that a lot of Northerners, returned to North Yemen. But
mm,
also the government of Abdul Mansur Hadi, who fled to Saudi Arabia when the Houthis occupied Sana'a. In fact, that government is sharing power in South Yemen. So
mm,
the Houthis say occupy and rule North Yemen, or a large part of former North Yemen, and South Yemen is being ruled by, what some people call the internationally recognized government of Yemen, in
mhm.
collaboration with the Southern Transition Council.
Yes. It's
Very complicated.
complex, and that's usually the case with wars. Every
Yeah.
war you talk about, people don't often realize how deep certain uh, yeah, origins of war can
Yeah.
be.
And
Um,
yeah.
yeah.
No, go ahead.
No, what I wanted to ask, like, the Houthis. So there we can talk, of course, with every conflict. You can say there's an internal dimension, but if we talk about the external dimension, what does that play, and what role does Saudi Arabia and the West play in this conflict? We know that Saudi Arabia was um, of course, invading parts of Yemen. There have been big fights. It has been supported by the US. I personally talked to Sudanese people who told me that, for instance, many Sudanese from all over Sudan, mainly Darfur, also were recruited by the Saudis to fight. So it has a very international dimension as well, no?
Yeah.
So what are the interests of Saudi Arabia, and are they the same as interests of the West? And
Yeah.
Yeah.
So as I said before, Saudi Arabia has seen Yemen for, well, until now as its backyard,
Mhm.
and as a very important and strategically very well, or important uh, yeah part of the Arabian Peninsula. And as we see now, it's bordering the Red Sea, it's bordering the Gulf of Aden, it's bordering it was the main, say, maritime route already like centuries ago, also in the time of the East Indian Company, to the east, to the Far East. But in addition, so the ports are very important, the location at the sea. Um, but in addition, Saudi Arabia has always wanted to control Yemen and have an influence on the government that was there. And what is interesting, was always supporting the imamate.
Mm.
So that imamate that has been there for centuries was in fact also, yeah, an ally of Saudi Arabia. And the civil war in the 60s, Saudi Arabia was supporting the imamate, while now it is fighting the Houthis, because it wants it wants a government or regime there that it can work with. And the Houthis definitely are not such a, they are religiously different, but they are also very much anti-American, anti-Western. Um, yeah, their political agenda is not so clear, but it's definitely not a good ally for Saudi Arabia. And I also have to say that Saudi Arabia until recently was, yeah, it was very well connected to Ali Abdullah Saleh's regime. It pays a lot of money. Oh yeah, that another thing I wanted to say is there's still, and people don't know that, but there's a lot of gas and also oil in Yemen. It's not compared to, say the Gulf states and Saudi Arabia itself, but there are in former North Yemen a lot of reserves that are not still unexploited.
Mm.
Um, so there's even there, theories about, huge pipelines that could lead to the Red Sea, to Saudi Arabia, that are, very, profitable. So it's not just politically, it's religiously, but it's also economically, interesting, and not just interesting, important for Saudi Arabia.
So, and how do you like what was the role? What used to be the role of the West
Yeah.
in sparking the conflict, in supporting one or the other parties, and what's in it for the West, and what kind of role do we play there?
Yeah, so in fact, Western countries became very interested in Yemen. Well, as I said already, 4 centuries ago, with the Eastern Indian Company. So the Dutch have been there since the 17th century. Also, very interesting books written about it, also by a Dutch historian, Kees Brouwer, has done a lot of amazing research about this relationship. But they never, these Dutch people could never enter, say, the mountainous areas of Yemen. They were very, difficult to access, and the Yemenis were very strong. But since 1970, I should say, with the oil boom, the West became, well, we know the crisis, 1973. There was a very strong, interest in at least having a stake somewhere on the Arabian Peninsula. And Yemen was, well, was a very underdeveloped country. The Imamate had just been overthrown, so Western countries started to invest in Yemen, and also knowing that it was a fertile and also a resource like rich country, but also politically to be there on the Arabian Peninsula, kind of strategically not close to Saudi Arabia and the Gulf states. So a lot of donor money has been put in Yemen, development projects from the Dutch, but also Germans, France, but also Japanese, also Gulf states. Yemen was really, especially North and South Yemen, was then supported by the Soviet Union, Cuba. So it has always been. It looked, yeah, that is also the point I often want to make. It looks like a faraway and not so relevant country, but it's really very relevant, and we don't know even how relevant it is in geopolitics. It is very relevant. Also now with Russia and China, there are people extremely interested in this, well, small, relatively small part of the globe or something. So that's why the development aid was put in. There were political, say, diplomatic relations. And then with the war, yeah, maybe you want to make the link to the war. When the Houthis occupied a large part of North Yemen, of course, Western countries were also threatened and felt like, wow, what's happening here? And they immediately started to, in fact, support Saudi Arabia, which they have always been supporting, because it is our, well, biggest ally, and our what is it? It provides us with oil, and it's too important to lose. And yeah, and then of course we can make the link to the weapon industry. So it's not just what we want from them; it's also what they want from us. So there are huge stakes in the weapon industry, and we know from Donald Trump already that I mean, they're incredibly big economic interests in supplying Saudi Arabia with, yeah, whatever weapons or spare parts or technical knowledge, etc.
Yeah. So that's the stake, and so there are many. It's more important than it seems. Why then? What is your explanation for the fact that have we've not heard so much news about it?
Yeah, I think that it's not so much in the media is, of course, one thing is that there are no refugees coming, not as many as from other countries coming to Europe. From Yemen, there's an increasing number of refugees coming, but not at all compared to Ukraine or Syria. But another thing is, yeah, I don't want to be like a conspiracy thinker, but I also think that, yeah, maybe it's far away, but the interests, political and economic interests of, yeah, I don't want to really say keeping the war going, but maybe to some extent are too big to really. But I mean, yeah, and then we come, of course, what can we do? So
Yeah.
I think we have to pressure, and put this the weapon industry, but also well, the economic interest, the political, yeah, say, very questionable relations of the Dutch government with a regime of the Saudi Arabian on the agenda. Keep it very high on the agenda. And I don't want to, this is a thing I often speak about with Yemenis, especially because I have many Yemeni friends who live in North Yemen that is now Houthi occupied. And they say, you're always blaming Saudi Arabia, but why don't you talk about the Houthis? And I think that is also true. I mean, we should not forget that the Houthis are also very radical, oppressive. There's no civil society anymore in the parts of Yemen where the Houthis are in power. So it's not one or the other, but
Both,
where, yeah,
just both.
both. And this is also, in fact, with the peace talks, because there have been peace talks and now they are on hold. There have been several peace talks between Yemen, between the Saudi government and the Houthis, that the Houthis are and the international communities involved, because they are UN, say, facilitated. The Houthis get a bit too much space for maneuver, and it looks like that when there will be a peace, it might be a peace in which the Houthis stay where they are, and Saudi Arabia withdraws, and Saudi Arabia, well, and yeah, kind of ends the war, having lost a lot of course, people, but also a lot of financial resources, etc. It has cost Saudi Arabia much more than they ever thought. But then the question is that a sustainable peace? And many of my Yemeni friends, they say, Marina, with the Houthis, there won't be a sustainable peace, because they are so oppressive, they are so mean, they are so, you can't trust them. This is not gonna anyway. So that should also be remain on the agenda.
It is not. It's not like one party is sort of sympathetic and the other.
No.
It's always we like to paint the world in good and evil, but it's in this case, it's both parties that are to blame for a lot of atrocities.
Yeah.
I want to talk to you to close off a bit about some solutions, and you've already started. But before that, I think we need to touch upon the reason why the Houthis are now in the news. Like, I wonder, are these the actions by the Houthis? Are these PR wise? Putting themselves on the agenda for the Middle East and within Yemen, maybe trying to sort of promote themselves, or are these real? Is it genuine, the support for the Palestinians? That's one question, and the second is, what are we actually doing there? I mean, does it make sense that we are there? As
you mean
the Netherlands joining
as part of the recent attacks? You mean?
So why is this Red Sea mission by the US and that has been joined by the Netherlands?
Exactly.
Does it make sense?
Yeah, no, it doesn't. But yeah, so the first question, the Houthis, of course, for them, this is an amazing opportunity to get recognition internationally. They, I mean, they really, I think it's very good for their PR, and that's what they want, and their support. I mean, also the support from the Arab population in the Middle East and North Africa in general, that is really frustrated with their own governments. So, and I know that also in Yemen, people are very, of course, they are extremely shocked about what's going on in Gaza. And they are very shocked that this genocide can go on. But they also are very anti-Houthi. Almost, I mean, everybody. They will say, okay, good that they do this, but it's for in their own self-interest. So it's not genuine. I would say it's not genuine, but of course you can already, I mean, from this whole talk, see that I'm also quite anti-Houthi. But I think it's not genuine, but it fits perfectly in their, ideology that they have been saying I mean, their slogan is also no against America, no against Israel, no against Jews, victory for Islam. So it fits in that. But one point I want to make is that every other Yemeni government has been pro-Palestinian. The Yemeni governments there have always been many Palestinian refugees in Yemen. There have been pro-PLO agreements. So it's not just the Houthis that now stand up,
No,
but
no, no.
yeah,
No,
of course, this
if
is
you see the videos, it's like I don't know if it's millions, but hundreds of thousands of people on the streets for quite
yeah,
often
yeah,
for pro-Palestine, let's say.
yes. But that is that these rallies, they are, I think, funded by the Houthis.
Mm.
So people get also money to go on the street. But I'm sure the whole Yemeni population is appalled by what's going on. So, but I don't think this will win the Houthi. The support of the Houthis will grow because of their
Mm.
what their
So,
attacks.
why? What, in your opinion? And sorry if it takes a bit more time than I ask you than I asked you before, but um, does it make sense that we are there as a West, as with together with the US and the Netherlands supporting this action?
No,
What does it?
absolutely not. Absolutely not. But of course, I'm also against this action. So I said it immediately when I heard that, well, the US and UK started to bomb Houthi targets in Yemen. What kind of solution is this? I mean, you want to protect your trade in the Red Sea, you want to protect your ships, etc., etc. The easiest way is, of course, to call for a ceasefire in Gaza, uh, and that will be for the Houthis, well, hopefully a reason to stop. That's one. The second thing, the Houthis are fighters. They like, well, I don't want to say love but the more, what is it? The more they are attacked, the more they will fight. So this will not solve this problem. I don't know how it's going to be solved, but this will not solve the problem. And for me, that there's one, say, Dutch general or something, or uh, advisor involved in this mission, yeah, of course, I think that's horrific. I think that's really giving a wrong signal. And already my Yemeni friends say, Hollanda is also involved. Hollanda, did you know Hollanda is involved? I say, yeah, but it's one person, but still, if
It's
one
about the
person,
political support.
it's
Yeah,
the political support. It's
yeah,
there.
yeah,
And
yeah.
it's really bad. It's really bad.
I can. Is there potential for escalation? This triggering.
That is what I don't know. I don't think so, but yeah, it depends, of course, on the what's going to happen in the recent or in the future or the nearby future. I don't know. I find it very hard, but it's not go bringing. It's more and more
It's not
again the
solving
West.
anything
It's
either.
again the West thinking that they can solve, say, problems in the Middle East their way, and that means militarily, which is it will, especially also this peace process, if there was already peace talks going on, it will bring things, I don't know how many steps back,
Mm.
because the Houthis will, of course, who's now going to talk with them? I mean,
Yeah.
but I find it also hard because I think, on the one hand, I think, yeah, the peace talk should not be with the Houthis, because this is not going to bring peace. But these attacks are again another, like, say,
Step back.
step back. So,
Mm.
and
So
yeah,
I think there's so much more I'd like to ask, and I see you know so much. So we cannot put everything in one podcast, but just to close off, and you've already touched upon it. Like, what should the Netherlands policy be, or the US policy? What if it were normal countries that honestly
yes,
believed in peace? What should
yeah.
they do?
Well, they should listen to the local population. Of
Mm.
course, that's very vague, but they should listen to Yemeni think tanks that are outside of the US. There's, for example, the Sana Center for Strategic Studies. These are Yemenis that know a lot of what could be done to really bring about peace in Yemen. And this is, of course, the same thing in Palestine. I mean, get the right information from people that know what's going on the ground, and not just militarily or economically, but also socially, how to, and then I think don't step back, but step maybe a little bit back and try to, I believe in what is called inclusive peace, of course, which means that you do not only talk with two parties, the Houthis and the Saudi-led coalition. Where is civil society? Where are is the women's movement? Where are the Southern Transition Council? There are so many other groups in Yemen that are not included.
Yes.
So, and I believe in the power of the Yemeni society to sort it out this problem. And Yemenis have always been able to. It's a diverse society in which there were mechanisms in which people sorted out conflicts
Yes.
tribally. That is completely disrupted now. And I know I was last year at the Yemen International Forum here in The Hague, and there was a session on mediation and how people on the ground try to mediate between conflicts, and also this kind of conflicts between, I mean, not the maybe, but peace. Yeah, peace should, well, we know that as people that work on peace, is not just an agreement.
No.
And it's, if it's just an agreement, it's gonna fail. It
Yes.
really needs to come from the grassroots level.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of work to be done. And the work we have to do is to support those groups and make sure they get a voice.
Yeah, and in the way we conduct, or the West conducts these processes, you can always see that we are not genuinely interested in peace. No,
No,
we are
exactly.
interested, I think, in control. We want to have a party that we can work with
Yeah,
to govern. That's it. We're
yeah,
not, of course, we know that the West and knows that what peace is and how you should accomplish it. But it's
yeah,
yeah, you see in so many places that the local people have been asking for very sensible things, and that both on EU level and bilateral level and US level, that we just refuse to really listen to
yeah.
these voices. No.
Very much. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Very sad. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
As a final remark, what would you like to say to ordinary people who are listening to this and who are interested in Yemen and what's going on? Is there something they can do? Is there something they can read more? Is there something they should follow in order to be up to date? What would you say to them?
Yeah,
I hear you're planning on making your own podcast, isn't that true?
yes, we're planning a podcast on Yemen. I've also set up an NGO, but it's not yet really got off the ground. It's called Manara, and it wants to shed light on the Middle East. Manara means lighthouse,
Hmm.
shed light on the Middle East and especially Yemen. Um, and we will also want to support small projects. So I know it's also hard to financially help, because the big NGOs, they do projects in Yemen, and there's a lot of need for humanitarian aid. But what I think I would like most is to, yeah, eh, read reports like those from the Sana Center, or other NGOs, but not just I think, and that is where my anthropologist heart or mission comes in. We don't need the geopolitical talks only. We need to look at stories of ordinary people, and also see the people, as I said, on the ground, that are trying to do good work. There's 30 million people in Yemen. They live there. They survive day by day. Yes, they need money, but more than money, they need attention. And that is the beginning, the forgotten war. This war should not be forgotten. It should be on the front page, but and my friends just say, Marina, don't forget us.
Yeah.
and and but I mean, this easy said. I mean, how can you, but yeah, there are good
So what's a good
sources.
start? Is that the Sana Center
Yeah, I
for
would say, but that is but that is
what's it called? Sana Center for
Sana
Strategic.
Center for Strategic Studies.
Yes. Okay. So that could be a
That's
start
a
for
good,
people.
but there are other I should know, there's also Right Radar. There is of course an organization called Oh, I should have it prepared.
Well, if you have it, then we can put it in the comments under the video.
Yes.
So
Okay.
thank you very much,
Yeah.
Marina. It was
You're
super
welcome.
enlightening, and it's
Yeah.
of course it's very late into this conflict, but it's never too late maybe to
No,
engage with
never
the
to.
Yemenis and to try
Yeah.
and also help them to build a normal functioning society where there's not only no war but also freedom.
Yeah.
So thank you very much,
Thank
Marina.
you.
It was a
Thank
great
you too.
talk, and hope to talk to you later once things
Thank
have
you.
maybe developed.
Thank you so much for inviting me.
Okay, have a good day. Bye.